Who is the most unexpected person you ended up dating? I went on a date with a guy who tried to rob me. 2 years ago, I returned home from my father's funeral. As soon as I opened the door to my apartment, a guy holding a crowbar came out from my kitchen holding my TV. I live in the city, so robberies are common. The guy began shouting at me and he clumsily dropped my TV and began holding the crowbar like it was a baseball bat. I was so stunned at what was happening that I didn't move. The guy screamed at me to empty my pockets. From the stress of the last few days with my father passing away, I simply started crying. Not out of fear at what was happening, but because this was literally the worst time of my life. The worst moment. The worst minute and second. While crying hysterically, I gave the guy my wallet. I just sat on my floor and hugged my knees and told him, through my tears, to take whatever you want. He hesitated, looked down at me. He dropped my wallet and sat down beside me. Immediately, he began to comfort me. He began to apologize. He put my TV back on the table and told me it wasn't damaged. He told me that he lost his job and that his mom needed medicine that he couldn't afford and that they were homeless. He told me all of this while I just wailed. I cried for my father, who was lost. I cried for my future, for it was uncertain, and I cried because my home had been intruded on in the most violent way. For a good 10 minutes I sat on the floor with a guy who had every intent to rob me, telling me that it would be okay and that he was sorry. He begged me not to call the police. I just started screaming at him to get out. He ran away so fast that he left the crowbar. I threw it after him as he ran down the street. 2 days later, I came home from work and he was sitting in front of my door. I was so terrified that I pulled out my phone, but he had this look on his face of remorse and regret. He told me that he told his mom what he did, and his mom made me some soup. He handed me this tiny bowl wrapped in tin foil. Again, I was so stunned and overwhelmed and angry that I slapped the bowl out of his hands and it shattered on the floor. I told him to leave or I was calling the police. He left. I remember he looked upset. I left the soup and shattered bowl outside my door, almost as a warning for him to not come back. About 3 months after that, I got a note in my mail slot from the guy. He told me his mother had passed away and that he was no longer homeless and that he had a job. He wanted to repay me for breaking into my apartment. He wrote down his address and told me that I was welcome to break into his place if I wanted, but he didn't have much stuff. This all overwhelmed me. I threw away the letter, but I remembered his address. I remember walking by there one day, out of curiosity. It was a ratty apartment building across the city. He was walking up to his room and he saw me. He waved. I turned away and left. He ran after me and apologized again. Told me that he never meant to do what he did. He showed me the program from his mother's funeral that he kept in his wallet. He wasn't lying, she was real. He was real. He was a real person. I don't know what it was, but I believed him. We slowly began to grow together as people. I can't describe it. After a year of maintaining communication and learning about who he was, he enrolled in a local community college and began taking courses to earn credits before applying to university. I helped him study for his history class a lot. He's great at math and science, though. I never invited him over to my apartment, however. No matter how much I got to know him, I was still afraid of him. And he knew that. He knew that I couldn't trust him. Then one night we went out for coffee because he said he had an exam in his World Civ class. When I got there, he said he forgot his book. We just talked for a bit, we laughed, and then he told me he wanted to cook for me. On a whim, I decided to invite him to my apartment. After picking up some things from the grocery store, he came over. I was so nervous that I was shaking. He noticed, he squeezed my hand, and then he made dinner. It was amazing. We talked, we laughed, we sat on the floor and watched a movie on the TV he tried to steal. We made jokes about it. And then he told me that he missed his mom. I gave him a hug. Then he left. I didn't know what I felt, but I did know that I couldn't give up on people anymore. Some people just get the short end of the stick. I figured maybe things would have a way of working themselves out. I miss my dad, too. Maybe my sympathy for him is why I didn't see the tornado coming. 6 months later, everything spiraled. I cared about him. I cared for him. I did, I can't deny that. In January, right after the new year started, I got a phone call at 2:30 in the morning from him. He was in jail. He and 2 of his friends were arrested for public intoxication and were in possession of substances. He wanted me to bail him out. I'm a teacher living on a teacher's salary. I said no, I couldn't. This is when things fell apart. Before then, he and I had been incredibly close. We spent Christmas together. I didn't have enough money for a plane ticket home, so I stayed in the city. He came over, we cooked, and watched movies. Before Christmas, we spent Thanksgiving together. I helped him study. I helped him get his finances in order. He had no idea how to do taxes and how to do all of the adult stuff, as he said. But I noticed I started doing things I didn't normally do. He would come over in the middle of the night, visibly panicked, and ask if he could stay with me. I let him, no questions asked. I stopped asking questions because I wanted to believe that he was good and everything was fine. He began asking me whether I would lie and claim not to know him if others inquired about him. This scared me, but I assumed it was about work stuff. I wanted it to be his work stuff. He was released from jail about a week later. He didn't talk to me. I called his apartment. Nothing. I came home from work one day and a woman was waiting outside my door. She appeared messy. She was wearing a tank top and flip-flops in mid-January in the Northeast. It was cold. When I tried to key into my apartment, she started verbally attacking me. She told me to stay away from him. Like she owned him. She told me that she knew what I did to him. And that I would get what's coming. She left. I was scared out of my mind. Before calling the police, I decided to call his apartment one last time. He answered. I told him about the woman. He apologized, said that he was seeing her. He didn't intend for her to come over and interfere. But that led me to another question. How did she know where I live? And how many others had he told where I lived? He hesitated before answering. I remember that. He just said he was sorry. I immediately packed an overnight bag, grabbed my most valuable items, and went to stay in a hotel. I used my emergency credit card because I no longer felt safe, because of him. I came back to my apartment the next day. Everything was fine. He came over to apologize. I told him to get out. I started crying. When I'm angry, I cry. He tried to hug me, but I remember picking up a dismantled IKEA shelf to protect myself. I demanded to know what he was doing. He told me he was selling substances. He told me that he had to do it because he knew people that would hurt him. Lies. I guess. I don't know. I told him to get out, I never want to see him again and so on. He got angry and then threatened to come back with his friends. I was racked with guilt for trusting him. He apologized again, and said he was sorry. I was questioning everything about him. I pushed him out and locked the door. The teaching program I'm a part of rotates teachers in and out of schools across the country. Last year I put in a request to move across the country to be closer to home. 2 weeks after this encounter with him, I found out that my request was accepted and I was set to leave in March. My apartment was broken into and vandalized in early February. At night, he would come and knock on my door. I would call the police, but he would always leave before they got there. His guys started harassing me. Nothing was ever stolen, just broken. They broke a glass bottle my dad made for me when I was 6. He knew how much that meant to me. It was shattered. The week before I left, I saw him outside my building. I called the police. He was walking over to me, and I remember having this fiery rage in me. It was this impassioned, red, angry heat that washed over me. I took my keys, which are on a lanyard, and I just started hitting him. I ended up cracking his eye socket. After he fell down, I started kicking him. I wanted him to die. I really did. Then I thought about what my dad would think. But then I realized. I'm not my dad. I will never be him. I'm different. This is different. People are different. Not all of them are good. But some of them are. I am good. I am a good person. When the police arrived and questioned him, they realized he was the one that was harassing me. He was wanted for a myriad of other charges. I never saw him again. Right now I'm sitting in my new apartment in a brand new city. It's warm. Rent is cheaper. I live in a neighborhood of old people. They're nice. They love that I teach kids. It makes them feel safe, I guess. Some days I leave my front door open and let in a breeze. I'm never afraid. The beach is literally a 7-minute walk from my back door. I'm happy. So I'm putting this to rest. It's done. It's over. I'm tired.